If you were to take your art out for a meal, where would you take it?
I'd probably take it somewhere one-on-one with me, maybe overseas to a new area.
Okay.
To really get to know it, I think. To reconnect with it. Because there's so much, I guess, around what we do, and the artist's life has so many different aspects. You know, you lose sight of what, you know, what it truly is and what it means to you and how special it is.
When did you first notice your art?
I guess we all are creative when we're younger, aren't we? We're encouraged to draw and paint and things like that. So I've been doing it, I guess, since then. But then once you start to get older, you realise it's something that you have to then sort of work to keep and to maintain. And you realise that, hey, you have to sort of carve out time for it.
Was it a slow burn, or was it quite fast and hot in terms of that noticing and committing?
I think it was slow. And depends as well what you do in your spare time. Like if you have time to just ponder, and that's, you know, that extra time, it's a privilege to make art. So if you have that spare time, you know, depends what you use for it. And I was always into drawing and colouring in, copying pictures. I just like the slowness of an engagement with, you know, the surface and building things up. And so it's a slow burn, I think. Yeah.
Ooh, what did you like to copy?
Well, and when I was younger, it's just like illustrations, cartoon sort of stuff. Like, oh, there's a face. Oh, I can copy a nose. Like, you kind of get past that stage of like, I can get a likeness to something, you know. So it's like, wow, I can just draw at what I see. Like,
I'm amazing.
Yeah.
This is great.
yeah, I'm like a mirror. Yeah.
How long were you dating your art before you committed to it?
Well, I think in high school it became more of an understanding of, okay, I'm doing art. And then, so I was definitely in the lunchroom a lot during school, focusing on that, and had a passion for it. But then I also was into music and other kind of creative aspects of things. So yeah, it was a back and forth between visual art and music.
As kind of these two creative loves.
Yeah, I like it's hard work to make something because there's no rules and formula, and also there's no criteria to judge it other than, you know, your subjective criteria. So it's difficult, but then the joy you get when you make something you're happy with, and it's a sense of discovery, and then you're like, wow, there's something that I made that is beyond me, you know, then that's a thrill. You know, that's an exciting thing to work towards.
How did you know you had committed to your art?
Well, my dad said to me when I was like a teenager, he's like, by the time you're 21, have something on the go. And I took that to mean like pick something and like really do it properly. And so I picked art and then went straight from school to uni and did almost 4 years of uni. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make this art career thing. So that got me really like, you know, passionate, but also persistent, and like for an ethic, like, okay, I need to do this, and I need to also prove that I could do it. In Perth at the time, being an artist wasn't seen as like...
That's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it.
No offence, but... Yeah, it's like the classic thing is, oh, you're an artist? Oh, so what else do you do? You know, it's like, oh, that's a nice thing for the weekend, you know. That's not everyone, but it's a general thing.
Yeah.
So also that kind of fueled me to be like, hey, I can prove that I can do this. I'll show you, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I love it. What did you have to give up in order to commit, or did you have to give anything up in order to commit to your art? Sounds like maybe music.
Yeah, I gave up music for a while, but also giving up maintaining relationships with friends and things like that. Like, you have to give up that social time, which that's, I guess, for everyone a bit of a balance. But you have to spend. I spent long hours in the studio, and that's what I thought when I was younger. That was the key. If I'm in the studio longer than such and such, that's the recipe. So I'd make an effort to like really be dedicated to what I was doing in terms of time and commitment in the studio. But as I get older, I realise that's not so much the key. That art happens outside the studio as well. Yeah. So, but that ethic and that dedication, I think, is still a good thing to have.
What's the craziest thing you've done for your art?
Well, I've done a few residencies, and I've done like projects where looking back, it was a bit stupid what I was trying to do. Not stupid, but like it's quite extreme. I was taking silicon impressions of like public shops in Paris, and I didn't really know which type of silicon to use when I was there, so I'd like put it on the surface expecting it to pop off cleanly, and like there's all this residue there, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to clean this up? And you're in a public space, so like being in public and making, working.
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah, and a new language. But it's good though. You need to get outside of your comfort zone and do stuff like that, and you learn a lot.
Have you ever cheated on your art?
As I said, with music is the other thing. There was a time when after my honours, I lived in New York for a year, and I had an art studio there, which was very expensive, but I ended up spending most of that time making music and made an album and things like that. And so the music became a focus for maybe 5 or 6 years. And then I moved to Sydney from Perth and thought, okay, I'm going to re-enroll in an MFA or into an MFA, and now I'm going to go back to art and reconnect with the visual arts. So
it feels like, my next question was, how do you woo your art to get back in the good books? Sounded like study was the first step.
Yeah, you just have to cultivate it and I think have a practice. You need I remember reading at the time where I was like, okay, what are successful people's routines? Like people have that self-help.
Yes.
Surely there's a formula. And what I got from all that was just like, even people who have quite erratic days, there's still a routine. There's still an ongoing practice. There's still a showing up. And so that's something I've always tried to do is be there for it, even if it's not working, or commit, just to commit to it and know that you're going to make horrible art as well, and almost to expect that. Like now when I'm starting a new body of work, at the beginning I'm like, okay, I cannot wait to make horrible works. They're going to be
get through the rubbish and get to the good stuff.
I made another horrible one, and it's like the formula. You start seeing the same formula at the beginning of a show, and then the end of a show, it's like, okay, horrible, experiment, and then a seed of something, and then like, oh, okay, a new thing, and then you get that rush of like, okay, I think I have a new direction, and then that's when it starts to kind of click. And so now that I've done a few shows and things, you sort of see those same processes go along, and you can kind of identify it and can almost plan for those stages of it, rather than like starting again every time, from ground.
Trust in the rhythm and the cycle.
Yeah, and just knowing that like art is not easy. Like it's, well, it is if you want to make stuff that has been done before or whatever, but if it wants to surprise you, which I think that's my ultimate goal, is like discovery rather than execution of a pre-existing idea. And once it does that, you need to then sort of put yourself out there and try all these different things, and so that takes time, and constant iteration and failure and all that sort of stuff.
One last question. What's your top tip for keeping a spark alive in the studio?
It's a question that I also want an answer to.
Stay tuned. You'll get to see others.
So it's a good initiative you're doing, because I don't think there's one answer. But some few things I thought would be maintaining a sense of play at all times, but play with experimentation. So not play like in an ignorant way where you're sort of just like la 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 la, but play that there's a joy, there's a sort of effortlessness, but also a willingness to do things that you're not comfortable with at the same time. So I think those two things, can be really good, and also to trust your intuition, things like that. And that's a cliche thing to say, but the intuitive kind of aspect, that's a kind of ties into play.
Can you tell when you're starting to disconnect from your intuition?
Yeah, when the self-doubt becomes like overwhelming, and then there's an inability to act. Like I realized that action is powerful, like just doing something and then seeing what happens through doing that. And then that's not to say it's uncritical, it just means that you're provoking something that then sparks a consideration and an analysis, and then that further starts the sort of the rolling of a motion. Whereas if you start to just sort of think, like, okay, I should do this, oh no, if I don't do that, oh, if I don't do, you get stuck in this kind of mental loop. So action and play are really good starting points. And then you can be as critical and as analytical as you can. Once you create something, then you can go, oh, is it good, is it bad? But not making anything, nobody wins. You know?
There's nothing to like look at or discuss.
That's it, yeah. It's just a thought that never happened, you know. So action, you know, also just like, and the action could be anything. Like it could just be dropping paint on something, or I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just to get the motion going. Action and play. I love that. Mason, Kimber, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.